Political analyst Stephen Roberts, he did it again. He makes a policy speech and he steps on his headlines. And now the story over the weekend is how he wants to sue these women as opposed to what he would do for the rest of us.
Look, it's an absolutely disastrous mistake for Donald Trump, as our ABC poll makes very, very clear. Hillary Clinton has a 12-point lead in the latest ABC poll. Now, I think that's an outlier, McGraw. I think it's not quite that large. The national average is about 6 points. But if you look inside the numbers, you can see what's driving this trend in Clinton's favor. It is not a burst of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. It is growing disillusionment, particularly among Republican voters, with Donald Trump. We asked this very question: how do you feel about Trump's handling of these allegations of sexual misbehavior? 41% of Republicans disapprove of what he's doing. We asked about his charges of a rigged election and maybe not accepting the results of the election. 1/3 of Republicans disapprove of how he's handling that issue. So it's very clear from these numbers that the single most important thing that's happening in politics right now is a growing disillusion with Trump, particularly among Republicans.
But you still have a couple of Republicans who are still tied to Donald Trump, and they're going to go down with the ship, which is the best thing for Democrats and the worst thing for the party.
Well, there are two things happening there. Both parties now realize that the presidential election is almost certainly over. And therefore, both are putting much more emphasis on down-ballot races, particularly in a state like Missouri with a very close Senate race. You're going to see a raft of late-term ads, a raft of surrogates pouring into that state. It's one of the states could decide the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. And Democrats have to pick up 4 seats. If they win the presidency, they've got to pick up 4 seats. They're almost certainly to win in Illinois, and Wisconsin leaves 2 more. That's why Missouri is going to be so important. And you might say, well, what difference does it make if the Senate's tied, if the Democrats are ahead by 1 seat, the Republicans can still filibuster? That's absolutely true. You got to remember, though, if you hold the Senate, that means you have the chairmanship of every single committee. You decide the hearings, you decide the witness list, you ask the first questions, you run the floor schedule, you decide which bills come up for debate. Even if you hold the Senate by 1 vote, it's an enormous source of power. And the Democrats are already looking to a post-election administration with Clinton and hoping that they will be able to control the Senate. And that's exactly for the same reason why you're seeing more and more Republican money and Republican effort being poured into the state races, including the Senate race in Missouri. You're going to be inundated there for the last 2 weeks with ads from both sides.
It's a perfect storm that's sort of brewing up for these last couple of weeks. Stephen Roberts, the fact that President Obama, in which oftentimes people ran opposite of President Obama in the Democratic Party, are now inviting him to their areas, speaks volumes that they see the polls and President Obama is popular and they're going for the jugular now?
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's rather astounding, right? You put your finger on a very important point. 4 years ago, a lot of Democrats were running away from Obama, particularly 2 years ago. They didn't want him in their states at all. He was a drag on the Democratic candidates. But now his popularity is well over 50%. And by the way, his wife's popularity is well over 60%. So as helpful as Barack Obama is in maybe stirring up the Democratic base and getting them out to vote, Michelle Obama is an even more valuable surrogate. And you watch the states she's going to. She's already been to Pennsylvania, North Carolina. She was in Arizona recently. She's in North Carolina recently. Those are the states that could actually tip the balance here. And the irony here is that the Obamas, at the end of their presidency, have become very popular surrogates. And in fact, yesterday on TV, Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's chief strategist, said, yes, we are behind, and asked why. She said, well, they have all these popular Democrats like the Obamas campaigning for him at the very time that Trump is trashing every day the record of the Obama administration. His chief strategist is saying the reason why Clinton is winning is because the Obamas are so popular and they're out campaigning for her.
Well, also, again, over the weekend, more emails come out that Hillary's campaign was upset that she was cutting a deal with Morocco for a $12 million donation to the Clinton Foundation, and she was going to go, and they canceled because it looked bad. Again, another terrible story that is drowned out by Donald Trump being Donald Trump.
But it is a terrible story, and you look at our polls for all of the ways in which people do not like Donald Trump. This trend line, that's a pro-Clinton trend line, is not a function of a sudden burst of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. That is not what is happening. 59% of the voters in our ABC poll say they disapprove of Clinton's handling of the email controversy. The driving force here is disillusionment with Donald Trump, and particularly among Republicans. We had one number at one point, Republicans, 91% of Trump supporters said they were enthusiastic about supporting him. In our polls, that's dropped to 79%. A month ago, Republicans had an advantage on the intensity gap, the enthusiasm gap. Today, the Democrats have that advantage, and it's almost entirely fueled by the missteps and mistakes that Donald Trump has made.
Stephen Roberts, ABC News political analyst. Thanks, Stephen. Have a good week.
Okay, pal.
7:50.